Hello, this is Crispin Flintoff. Just want to say that more people have been unsubscribed from this channel without them knowing about it. I've also had my computer hacked this week, so I guess I must be doing something right. Please make sure you're subscribed or you won't hear about these videos. And I just want to say the video you're going to watch is all about no platforming, which is a very contentious subject. And I don't think anyone on the left is really dealing with this. I'm just going to show you the results of the survey that I put out to subscribers on no platforming. It does make interesting reading. There you are. 45% of people in principle agree with the idea of no platforming certain people, and 55% disagree. So it is a very split issue. Everyone's a bit divided on this. I wanted to also introduce why I am interested in this subject. I mean, the thing is, last week we had a discussion on the show about the far right and the rise of the far right, and also the idea that maybe Tommy Robinson was being backed by the Israel lobby, and how that might relate to the riots and etc. It's questionable, but it's people are saying that. People like Low Key have written about this. And on the show, if you were watching the show, there was a comment in the chat here. Sorry, Crispin, you need to be very careful about allowing these really crazy ideas to be disseminated. I won't be watching anymore. Clearly, people are very angry, right? So this is not the way to influence the British political system. David Miller, whoever he is an extremely dangerous and unprincipled individual. Now, I know David Miller's controversial, but the fact that he managed to win a case against his Bristol University to support the idea that anti-Zionism is a protected belief, I think that is massive, a very significant ruling. And the fact that he went through so much on the way to that, losing his job and the amount of criticism and just being ostracized by loads and loads of people on the left. The fact that he won, I thought people may have changed their mind on David Miller. So I was quite surprised at that. And then on social media this week, I was sort of talking about this issue, and I got this response from Alex Snowden. Miller has a record of anti-Semitic remarks. Nobody on the left should be giving him a platform or sharing a platform with him. I mean, I was like, what? Are we really going to no platform David Miller because of remarks that he's made? We discussed a year ago. Actually, it was about exactly a year ago. We discussed a tweet that he put out, and I remember I discussed it with Jackie Walker, and she was in a festival at the time. She's got a better signal now. Are you there, Jackie?
Yes, I am here.
I know you're there somewhere because I've spoken to you earlier, but what do you make of this idea that he should be no platformed?
Oh my God. I mean, first of all, to even suggest somebody like Miller is very dangerous is I think ridiculous for a whole host of reasons. And whoever that person is, I don't know who they are. They're not using their name on that tweet, on that message. If they don't know who Miller is, then I'm a bit unsure of where they're coming from at all, because most people on this program would know exactly who he is. So I'm a bit suspicious about that. That's the first thing. But in any case, on principle, if anyone notices, the right, the Starmer, they never no platform each other. I'll repeat that. They never no platform each other. It's the left who do this and the right who do it to the left. It is not and should never be used as an easy weapon of our side. Now, do I think that there is never, ever a case for no platforming people? I can imagine that in some kind of situation, I could imagine somebody who was actually organizing openly against certain groups to be violent, that you would say this person cannot be given any space at all. But we defeat these arguments by talking, by debate, by evidence. And this is, again, I mean, I don't know if any of you remember, not only was I no platformed, but those people on the left who no platformed me, many of whom have privately admitted they were wrong, are still no platforming me. Because the problem is, once you do it, you can't stop. And it only affects the left. There's all sorts of things that Miller has said where I've gone, well, I wouldn't put it like that, or I don't think that's quite right, or whatever. I defeat it by talking about it and thinking about it, not no platforming. That is not our strategy. That is the strategy of our enemies.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you for that. I mean, I'm just want to understand it really, because if we do know, I mean, I don't want to be in fear that if I word something wrong, then
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to talk, because everyone will say, oh, he said this thing.
Yeah.
He didn't get it. He said this thing that's really offensive, and he should. I mean, that thing about he should never be given a platform by anyone on the left.
Just
That
ridiculous.
just blew my mind.
Yeah.
I mean, I just want to show you the follow up to that actually, which is even more telling. Is I was really kind of shocked at this response that he should never be given a platform. So I wrote, do you want to discuss this issue with David Miller on Sunday morning? And then nobody on the left. And I put, happy for you to speak about who you know platform, why you know platform, and not include David Miller or anyone else you know platform, unless, of course, you know platform me for platforming. And this is the response. You're blocked, which to me is another. It's another form of no platforming, because you're just saying to someone, I'm not listening to you. You haven't got any part to play in this at all. So I'm not. I don't have a faction either. I'm not in a group on the left. I'm not. I mean, I'm not particularly proud of that, but I'm just not. So I'm not coming from any one telling me they want me to say this or that, or this is the person you shouldn't talk to, or whatever. So I can't see it in those eyes, through that lens. But I think other people can clearly see this is an enemy of mine on the left, and this is not my friend. So I'm going to say this and say that. But anyway, look, I'll come back to you, Jackie, because it'd be good.
Can I just say one thing? I remember when I went on Iranian TV and I got castigated for it, right? And I said to the person, that's all right then, I'll go on the BBC because they're so much better at reporting about race and politics. And that's what we're talking about with all this ridiculous no platforming nonsense. We are for free speech and defeating people through debate.
Right. Now, I put a survey out and I also asked people to come and speak, and not many people volunteered, but I'm really pleased. John Tumman has agreed to come on, and he said he's got a good sort of background to know platforming and how it came about. What would you like to say, John? How are you doing?
Fine, thanks, Crispin. I'm 74 now. I was involved very much in opposing the National Front in the 70s and the 80s. And I think no platform then and no platform now are two very different things. No platform for maybe around a decade now has been emerged out of identity politics, I think, and people getting outraged when other groups didn't agree with their version of who their community was, why it was like that, etc., etc. I think that's always been an inappropriate misuse of no platform. no platform emerged out of the nature of fascism in the interwar period. Fascism, the big symbol of fascism in Italy was the fasces, the bunch of sticks who were strong together and could not be broken. And the way it operated was through groups called the squadri, who were tightly organized, very disciplined, quite small groups of fascists who, particularly in the Italian countryside and small towns, would go in to break up working class trade union gatherings, demonstrations, protests, etc., very viciously, using violence to do that. Because Italy at that time had a very strong left, and was getting close to a revolutionary situation. And fascism was let loose to deal with the left. And in Germany, the same kind of process happened. The Sturmabteilung, the brown shirts, their particular job, they were small, tightly organized groups attacking big working class demonstrations during the Weimar Republic, trying to get the left off the streets from stopping selling left newspapers, stopping selling trade union newspapers, going into clubs that they regarded as decadent. Many people will have seen Cabaret. That kind of thing went on quite a lot. The attacks on women and the way that women in Weimar were starting to be liberated. And so and of course, in this country, Cable Street is the most famous, but it certainly wasn't the only one occasion on which the left and the working class got together to stop a fascist march through a Jewish area. And that was really important.
Yeah.
Through a Jewish area. Now, if I can bring that up to date, after the war, the Second World War, Oswald Mosley's organization continued in this country, and the Association of Jewish Ex-Servicemen, certainly in Manchester, which I moved to in 1974 from the Midlands, they used to fight the fascists on the streets. And when I joined the Manchester Anti-Fascist Committee immediately upon coming up here, they were very strong on no platform because of the nature, and it was a tactic, not a strategy, a tactic for dealing with the reality of fascist demagoguery, that the fascists, certainly in the interwar period, would play on emotion. They would play on denying reason, not engaging in evidence-based discussion, but they were there to rabble-rouse. And so that was dangerous. This was an era where people were becoming much more aware of propaganda and how it operated. So that tradition or traditional tactic was used throughout the period when we were opposing the National Front. And it was important because they were a classical fascist organization who operated in that kind of way in order to try and be successful. Fast forward to now, the circumstances are entirely different. All the advanced capitalist countries have developed a strong coercive state. They have police forces trained and equipped to deal with civil disturbances, protest movements, and so do many outside the advanced capitalist countries. So they do not need fascism. Right. The ruling class will not back fascism in this country. And that makes it far less of a threat. The threat is the state, not organized fascism. What we have now is entirely different. We have a few people who may be still fascists. We have a lot, as Jackie has talked about, and I'm very familiar with this as well. I worked in Oldham during the noughties in the aftermath of the Oldham and Burnley and Bradford riots in 2001. And the marginalized working class communities, white working class communities in Oldham, had been politically abandoned by the Labour Party, abandoned by the council. And when they started to vote for the BNP, what we did was go in there and start community newsletters, contacting people in the area, getting them to articulate the real problems in those communities and helping them resolve those problems, helping them challenge the police, challenge the local council, and so on. And we thwarted the BNP vote doing this in their 3 main target wards. Now, the other thing that has changed in the period we're in now is the nature of the tactics which they can use. And no platforming is irrelevant to the tactics which happened in the riots, the way in which Yaxley Lennon operates, the way in which Farage operates, the way in which Douglas Murray operates, because I think those 3 actually are very different. The rabble-rouser, Yaxley Lennon, the political organizer and dog whistleblower, Farage, and the nearest they come to a right-wing intellectual in the British Isles, Douglas Murray, editor of The Spectator. Now, no platform has no role anymore. And the idea that we should be no platforming people on the left and not debating. The left is about ideas or we are nothing. We are about ideas. We are about justice. We are about people. And a lot of people have forgotten that, and they just reach for this thing that they've heard of, no platform, and they don't know its background and they misapply it. That's all. Thank you very much, Crispin.
No, that was a very good introduction and very interesting, and you put it in context as well. I appreciate that. Thank you very much, John. I'm going to move on to Sabi, who knows a bit about history, has written a few books on it. What's your take on this, Sabi?
Well, thank you, Crispin. I very much agree with John Tamman about the way in which the development of the capitalist state has preempted, in a sense, the need for fascist movements. However, I think we are seeing the increasing economic destabilization of certainly the Western capitalist economies, slowly growing crises. And I wouldn't exclude entirely the need at some point for the capitalist state to engage with far-right movements, whether we call them fascist or not. I think that this could be, just another weapon that they keep they keep at their side, just in case they need to ally themselves with the far right. And as we've seen the far right grow in not just in this country, France, Italy, the United States. So it is a weapon to be used, if necessary, by the capitalist state, particularly if we're going to witness in the coming years an upsurge of working class militancy. If we're going to see a renewal of the kind of working class activity that we're beginning to see last year, that we saw on a huge scale in the 60s and 70s, then I wouldn't exclude that the state will need an ally in order to provide assistance
Right.
in crushing, smashing.
So I'm just thinking about the time. Do you actually think that that the concept of no platforming is appropriate when you're talking about someone like David Miller, though? I mean,
No, I don't.
John said is a historical perspective.
Yes.
He's not anywhere like the people that we've historically no platformed.
No platforming. I mean, we're talking not just about debate, but we're talking about marches. So yes, you could go back to the 1930s, the way in which the Jewish, the Irish communities stopped Mosless fascists marching through the East End. So, you know, Lewisham, for example, I mean, I'm old enough, I was active in the anti-Nazi League in the 70s, the great, you know, the way we stopped the Nazis marching in Lewisham. So, so the idea that large-scale Nazi movements could emerge in contemporary capitalism should not be entirely excluded.
Right.
So I agree with most of what John Tamman said, but I think he perhaps slightly overstated his case. So I mean, so I think we still need to assert the principle. You know, there's no debating with fascists. Fascists would use free speech in order to advance their movement, in order to take power and abolish all free speech. There's no debating with racists who would use their platform to incite hatred against vulnerable groups, minority groups like Muslims, immigrants, asylum seekers, Jews, and so on. So free speech, one of the great Enlightenment principles of modern Europe, free speech can't be unlimited or unconditional. The question arises, one interesting side issue perhaps is the question, do you debate with Zionists? I wouldn't give a Zionist a platform. They would use that platform in order to promote the state of Israel. However, I think there is a case for debating with Zionists on certain occasions, simply because of the fear of a number of Jewish people about the rise of anti-Semitism. I myself, for example, I've got a couple of Jewish friends who are iffy about Israel, and I've had vigorous arguments with them. So that is something we should keep.
Right.
We should keep.
Okay. No, I bet. So I'm just aware there's a lot of people suddenly put their hands up. I bet and I haven't got very long. Thank you, Sabi. Hey there, Francis. You filled in the survey and said, I think that you were against no platforming, but then you changed your mind and said you shouldn't platform people from the far right. I mean, what Sabi was, is that correct? So I just want to check. Is that right?
I wrote the wrong thing to you, so I wrote and apologized. I did an enormous amount of work in the anti-fascist movement in the 70s and 80s and went touring all over the country with theatre funded by the Arts Council, oddly enough, which was anti-fascist. We were chased around the country by the National Front, besieged at our offices in Swiss Cottage, and I got to know what was going on. And so the whole thing about how you do with fascism, it's the notion that it goes away or it comes back is completely pointless, because it never goes away and it is always stood up to, and it comes out in completeness is the main thing I want to say. It's not always the same. It comes out in undercover ways. So what appears to be not fascist can actually be fascist, depending on the context in which it's appeared. For example, I think the Israeli state, I am Jewish and I will say it now, is a close to fascist state, and that there are many people like me who are opposing it like mad. Now, it seems very odd that that ideology should be appropriated in a place like that, but it may be less odd than we think because of the role of Israel as a front against the East, or has been. All the complexities of international politics are dumped onto Israel. And so how one describes what is and is not fascist is actually more interesting and more complex than it appears to be.
Right.
I did all the workshops I did were fascinating. and the theatre performances I did were fascinating, because I remember coming out of one of the performances in Bradford at the Library Theatre in Bradford, and I wasn't in it, I directed it. So I went out because I gathered there was a fascist picket outside. I go outside and there's this row of great big blokes in suits with NF on their collar, on their jackets, who looked at me and said, "You bloody Jew."
Wow.
Now, I went berserk, but the picket line stopped me from hitting them. And we stood there for quite a long time. They called the police. And the police tried to negotiate them into the performance, and I refused and refused and refused because I was in charge. But eventually there was applause, and I said it's over, and they said we can go, and I said no, the show's, and the kind of what I'm actually saying, I know this is a bit chatty, the manifestations of fascism are quite complicated. I think that behind it, the political notions are probably, generally speaking, related to each other. I won't say the same, and based on race, difference, and class. And I think this has been said. The issues of fascism and class are really, really important. And when you see it in terms of international politics, which, you know, an almost third world war is going on because there are so many places with wars, Israel plus others, that you can see that the underlying reactionary, repressive ideologies are there. That's all. I hope that wasn't completely irrelevant.
Well, look, I thank you, Francis. Now, I just want to ask a question, and maybe people could respond to this question. If no platforming is a successful strategy, then and has been used, then why have the far right risen? Aren't Tommy Robinson and these, I mean, so-called Tommy Robinson, these other lot, they've got their own echo chambers. They can go wherever they want in their own platform. They don't really need our. If I said, Tommy Robinson, you can't come on this show, he'd just laugh in my face. I mean, I don't really get how it doesn't seem that it's a strategy that works, is what I'm asking. Can anyone want to speak about that? Al Williams contacted me to come on. Are you okay to speak, Al?
Yes, I am okay to speak. Yeah, it's just a bit noisy here, but my hosts are leaving, so I now have.
I just saw your hand moving. I thought, are you trying to sort the room out? Yeah, no.
Yeah, no. I mean, I basically agree with John. I think it was a great introduction to the subject, but I also agree with Sabi. I'm not an experienced anti-fascist organizer. I'm sort of more somebody who's done 10, 12, 13 years of other types of organizing. I've not gone on that many anti-fascist demos, actually. I'm not quite sure why. But I've encountered this no platforming thing online a lot, where you can't debate some people because they're so high follower count compared to you. They ignore you, they won't debate you, they block you. And it's very frustrating. But I basically agree. We should, on the left, we should debate each other. We shouldn't no platform different flanks of the left. But if you're talking about someone like Tommy Robinson, we have to know platform him, because, like you say, if he came on the show, he would be laughing at all of us. He'd make a mockery of it. You can't give him a platform on Trafalgar Square, otherwise he'll show his film. Then he'll be in contempt of court, and he could prejudice trials. And he's allowed to do that. And the Met and counterterrorism know that happened, and yet he still slips away to Cyprus. So he's obviously quite a high-level operator, this guy. I mean, is he an MI5 or an MI6 asset? He's definitely a Zionist asset.
Well, that would be people have no platform. People have no platform you for that, if you're saying that.
Well, luckily,
the thing is though, there are people, in a sense. I have to make a kind of confession here, is that sometimes I have taken people off this show who've attacked other people on the show. Like they've said rude, they've been rude about someone in the chat, or said something that was really upsetting someone else, and I've taken them off. I mean, you could call that no platforming, but effectively, if Tommy Robinson were on this show, I'm sure he'd offend someone within seconds, and I'd have to take him off just on that.
Well, sometimes he's quite clever, isn't he? Sometimes he can come across as almost coherent. He's actually fooled a whole flank of a movement. I don't want to get into the discussion over it because it's very identitarian politics, and it's sort of, you know, it's where his campaign is crossing over with another complex campaign, and it gets. I can see people chatting about it in the background. It's very, very complicated, and I haven't got the time to address the complexity of that. But he's very good at duping certain flanks of society, whether they be like working class people who've got concerns about what's going on in their community. People like him are very manipulative, and they can morph through different roles, like in a crypto-fascist way. So some people who are quite working class people, they think he's a social justice warrior, and he campaigns, you know, to protect women and children. But like that's not who he is.
Yeah.
But he's duped those people,
Yeah.
and then they can dupe other people. And this is what fascism is. It's
but in a way that there are people who are on our side, supposedly, who may not be doing it in the right way, and they might be in a way misleading us too. And the only way we can actually find that out is to get them out into the light when we
debate each other. Yeah, and then we find out if they are far right, or they're just confused, or somebody's misinformed them. And it's sometimes it can be a combination of all three.
Ruth?
Hi. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
I just wanted to say something very simple. Has everybody forgotten when Nick Griffin went on BBC Question Time? I mean, that was appalling. We had to send in complaints to the BBC. It all depends who's chairing the meeting. If you allow somebody onto something like Question Time and you get someone like Fiona Bruce chairing it, it's going to be a savage, you know, savagery of any real justice. So you can't allow someone like him to go on an establishment platform like that, because people will believe that is BBC is endorsing it. And they had a hard job getting out of that one. So I think that you really have to find out who is chairing the meeting, whether they're going to be a fair chair, and whether there'll be any control over offensive language or offensive ideas, for a start.
Yeah.
That's all I've got to say.
No, it's a very good point. Thank you. Anne, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi. Yes, I don't think no platforming is a useful term. As you said, Crispin, there's always another platform. You can set up your own platform if you haven't any other options. But I think, you know, if you own or manage a platform like this one or any others, you have the right to decide who you give a voice to and who you don't give a voice to. And especially if you've got a limited time frame like we have here, you can't possibly give a voice to everyone. So, you know, you give a voice to the people you think are worth talking to and who your audience is going to like. If you put on a whole load of Tories and right-wingers, your audience is going to all run away. So you're not going to do that, obviously. I hadn't realized when I filled in your form that this was about David Miller, or that he caused the questions to be asked. He said a few things that could be dubious. I mean, a lot of us on this program have been accused of anti-Semitism. I don't think that's a good reason to take people off. David Miller and quite a lot of other people have said a few dubious things but they also have some very good views. And I don't think someone like that needs to be banned, but they do need to be questioned. I think, for instance, George Galloway needs to be questioned about some of his views, and other people do as well. But there are some dedicated racists, fascists, anti-Semites who you can't discuss with. We had one in Labour International who was a Holocaust denier, and he kept posting stuff on the internet, and it took us a long time to get rid of him because McNichol was still the general secretary, and they kept losing the evidence and everything. Eventually, he was gone when Jenny Formby came along. So some people you can't debate with; they're dedicated. You know, there's no point. There's no point even trying to talk to them.
Thank you. Thank you, Anton. I'm just aware of the people that hit. As I've gone over time again, but I'll try and get some more people in. If you could keep it.
I think the last two speakers, whose names I didn't catch, so because I was messing around, kind of raised some points that I wanted to raise, which I think the crucial thing that's missing in a lot of this talk about no platforming is there an opportunity for debate? And if there is an opportunity to debate, then we should never no platform anybody, because the very, you know, as other people have said, if you can debate somebody's dodgy views or somebody, you know, views that you disagree with that you want to challenge, then that's absolutely what you should be doing. I think the idea of platforming or no platforming is that you're giving that person or denying that person a platform for potentially, you know, offensive views. And that's very different. And your show is not a show that gives people a platform to just, you know, voice discriminatory opinions or whatever, because people can challenge, and you give people the chance to challenge that, or you challenge them yourself, or as you've said, you remove people if they veer into being offensive. So the idea of David Miller not being allowed to come on your show because some people, perhaps legitimately, I'm not going to get involved in that, think that some things that he said has veered into anti-Semitism is, I think, inappropriate, given that you would always give those people the chance to say to David Miller, well, hang on, what did you mean by that? Or I didn't like that you said that, or can you expand on that? Can you explain it? And you've exactly tried to do that this week, and the opportunity hasn't been accepted. So I think that's the really bad side of no platforming, and I don't think that should ever happen. I think legitimately there is a time where we no platform, and that is when it is actually a platform, when somebody is going to have a platform to just speak without challenge and without debate. And then if you are the owner of that platform, then of course you have the right to say, and perhaps a duty to say, well, I don't want that person on my platform because I know that he's upset that minority group, or that, you know, that group of people. And just to cite an example of that, just very quickly, one of the university encampments refused to share a platform at a Palestine Solidarity event. They refused to share a platform with George Galloway. Now, I know you are a big supporter of George Galloway. I'm much less so, and I can understand why the students took the stance they did. And they took the stance they did because they knew it would be really upsetting to the queer community, who had come out very strongly for the Palestine cause. So they wouldn't do it. And I understand that, and I think we should respect that. But that's very much a decision by that group of students. And it's not saying, I don't think you should give them a platform, it's just we don't want to share it. And then it's up to the organisers to decide, you know, what they want to do with that. And I just think those are the crucial differences, really. Is there debate? If there's debate, like we've been saying about Nick Griffin on Question Time, then great. It gives you an opportunity to pull that person apart, pull their arguments apart, you know, expose them, whatever. If you don't have that chance and it's just somebody speaking and potentially derailing something or you know, subverting something, then yeah, it's your right as the owner of that platform or the sharer of that platform to, you know, platform. I would say.
I'm going to bring on Tony, who's been no platformed. I would have thought he's been at a few no platforms. I wonder how many times Tony Greenstein's been no platformed. Tony, have you got the world record for being no platformed? Is it true?
No, it's not true. The Zionists have certainly attempted to no platforming. The most memorable occasion was about 20, 30 years ago, was at the LSE, when they did all they could to stop me speaking. I was invited to the Palestine Society, but people actually looked into their allegations that I was an anti-Semite and so on. But the result of the controversy was a meeting that would have had 20 people, had about 150 people attended. So they actually built the meeting instead of destroying it. But the point I want to make, amongst others, is, look, no platform comes from really the idea of no pass around, they shall not pass, against the fascists whose desire in the 30s and beyond is to control the streets. In other words, by controlling the physical environment, they then make it dangerous for black people, Muslims, and so on to go about their business. I mean, that's what fascism is about. It's an attack on very basic democratic rights. And therefore, in that situation, it's perfectly fine and permissible. Indeed, it's necessary to no platform them. No platform isn't about who you invite onto your program. That's an individual choice. The BBC no platforms us all the time, of course, and so do many other media commentators. But no platform is about the defense of our basic democratic rights. And when the National Front or the BNP or whoever, or Robinson's thugs for that matter, try to control the streets, they do that to prevent other people being there and in order to make the environment unsafe for black, Muslim and other people. But I don't think we should confuse that with banning people who we disagree with. And that's what is the case with David Miller, for example. The Zionists don't like what he has to say, so they accuse him of anti-Semitism and then try to stop him speaking. Well, if they have a case, then they should debate it. But of course, Zionists actually don't like to debate because they have very little to say beyond the usual cliches. I mean, I'm happy to debate usually Zionists, but they won't do that. There are also occasions.
Can I just ask you on that? When was the last time you had a debate with a Zionist?
The times I've debated with Zionists is when they've tried to stop me speaking at Union General meetings of students and so on, because then they come out with their arguments about how this is dangerous to Jews if you support the Palestinians. And then or at Unison Conference, and when I moved the motion on boycott, divestment and sanctions, when they're forced to, they debate, but they don't debate very well because they don't have very much to say. And their arguments about anti-Semitism fall flat when they face someone who's Jewish, because then their arguments really don't hold water. But when it comes to not only people like David Miller, but say the debate on trans rights, I don't think it's permissible just because someone agrees or disagrees on the question of trans rights that they should be no platformed. You have to have these arguments out. Free speech is an essential component of a democratic society, and we shouldn't jettison it easily. But that is different from defending your own rights from fascists and racists. I mean, I think it was acceptable and quite in order for Sussex University students to no platform Samuel Huntington in the 60s. He was a professor who had actually provided the academic respectability to the genocide in Vietnam. I mean, the guy had blood on his hands, and to have these people, to have, say, Israeli military spokespersons coming onto campus, I think they should be no platformed because they're murderers. But that's absolutely different from you and me disagreeing over something like, I don't know, the program of how to form a left party or so on. That is simply unacceptable because you can't, on the grounds of things like safe spaces, some people in the identity politics left try to actually no platform their opponents. If they can't debate it out, then that's really tough luck. But that is an abuse of no platform. No platform is a very specific tactic to defend our own movement and our own people.
Right. Well, look, I appreciate your points there, Tony. Very well made. Good to see you again.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And I hope you're on many more platforms.
One or two, I suspect.
And I'm going to bring on Trish. I probably might have to move on in a bit. Sorry, it's just that the time's going really crazy. Trish.
Thanks, Crispin. I just wanted to bring it back to why this came up, and it's about David Miller. I'm a bit worried that we're talking about fascists and we're talking about David Miller without clarifying. Fascists get a lot of platforms already, sometimes in our mainstream media, or clever sort of right wingers who get on the media all the time. So I'm not thinking about those, but I'm thinking about David Miller. One, what he said, which has been put up about Jews not facing discrimination, is about outcomes for Jewish people. It's not about not facing anti-discrimination or not facing anti-Semitism. He's an academic. He's used an academic theory about outcomes and discrimination. And in fact, this has been tried and tested in court by the now King's Council, then Queen's Council, and been found not to be anti-Semitic. What is bothering me is people on the left, or supposedly on the left, saying that he's straying into tropes. That's not the same as non-platforming, a fascist. For a start, the courts have found that David Miller is not an anti-Semite. He has stood against anti-Semitism. And when he talks about Jews not facing discrimination, he's talking about outcomes for Jewish people, which he clarifies in point 2. And if people don't understand that, they need to talk to David Miller about that, who would defend it very beautifully. The truth is, people talking about straying into tropes, I'm kind of fed up of this, really. This idea of where the line is, the trope. Think about tropes about other communities. I'm from an Irish background. I hear tropes about the Irish day in, day out. I hear tropes about being a woman. Disabled people hear tropes about being disabled. It's a constant thing that we hear tropes about our generalised communities. Particularly, I hear a lot about the Irish, particularly now, actually. And it's constant. The truth is, I need to accept that other people have got different expectation of what they accept to be offensive or not offensive. If somebody's offended by something, that doesn't mean the other person has committed a crime. If somebody is sensitive, and even some of the comments in your stream there that you had, or the thread on Facebook, talking about, well, he may have been factual, but it strayed into being insensitive. I mean, Ken Livingstone was speaking fact, and his career was destroyed, and perhaps his mental health destroyed by people saying that it was anti-Semitic, even though it was fact. If we can't say fact, I know that a lot of Irish people have been involved in alcoholism. I know a lot of Irish people came over from Ireland and became the kings of the Kilburn High Road and sat in pubs. It's a reality. It doesn't mean that when people are saying it, they're talking about my parents. It doesn't mean they're talking about me, because you know what? This isn't about me. And maybe people who are clutching their pearls immediately, could David Miller has said something that they find difficult and they're not prepared to speak to him, they need to get themselves a serious life. I'm so angry with them. David Miller is not an anti-Semite.